Hello and welcome to another episode of Latitude. Apart from battling militant groups in Pakistan's frontier areas, Pakistan's armed forces have been involved in suppressing dissent in two other regions. One is the northern areas, particularly in Baltistan and Gilgit, and the other is the landmass of Baluchistan. Recently, Islamabad conducted another round of legislative assembly elections in Baltistan, which India has protested against.
Not just India, the recent polls in Baltistan were also challenged by political parties of Pakistan, since the region is yet to be constitutionally integrated as a province of Pakistan. Baltistan is strategically located north of Ladakh, between Siachen Glacier and China to its east, with Gilgit to its west, and thus referred to as Gilgit-Baltistan. Despite a presidential order granting self-rule to the people of the mountainous region since 1947, the northern areas have been tightly controlled by Pakistan. Baltistan has a population of over 1 million Shias who are now being displaced by the influx of Sunnis from Pakistan, along with the Chinese. Since the Karakoram highway runs through Baltistan, Beijing is keen to quickly connect Kashgar to Gwadar as part of a $46 billion China-Pakistan economic corridor, with roads and a pipeline network via Balochistan. The Balochis resent Pakistan's high-handed approach. Their gas resources are being hogged up mostly by Pakistan's Punjab. And Punjabi workers have come into Gwadar and elsewhere in their state, taking away jobs and changing the demography. As per Pakistan's Human Rights Commission, hundreds of Balochis are subjected to brutal killings and forced disappearances at the hands of Pakistan security forces each year. In response, Baloch rebels have begun attacking high-profile targets. In March, they attacked tankers carrying fuel to a Chinese company. As this continues to worry China, it could be a good reason for Beijing to reconsider its investment in Pakistan, even though Pakistan has promised Beijing that a 10,000-strong force will protect Chinese workers.
It is clear that there is a huge deal of resentment against the high-handed rule of Islamabad and its military men from Rawalpindi, both in Baluchistan and Baltistan. And to discuss the subject in greater detail, we have with us two experts, Mr. G. Parthasarathi, former Indian High Commissioner to Pakistan, and Mr. Sushant Sareen, a distinguished fellow of the Vivekananda International Foundation. Mr. Parthasarathi, sir, my first question. While parties in Pakistan are calling for the integration of Baltistan and Gilgit-Baltistan and the northern areas, Islamabad's traditional stand has been that any deeper integration of that area within Pakistan's framework would dilute Pakistan's position and stand over the entire accession of Jammu and Kashmir, in the hope that Islamabad is hoping that it will happen one day in its favor.
Yes. Well, I think a certain fiction they would like to maintain. But Maruf, I see a greater and more important reason behind this. Pakistan sees Gilgit-Baltistan as its corridor to China. I still recall even during Kargil conflict, we knew of Chinese weapons coming in through this corridor to Pakistan. The Chinese are there in very large presence. Now, if you give it genuine statehood where there are free elections, then the results could be unpredictable. So this is an area where they will not concede any substantive autonomy or self-rule, not even to the extent that they give to what is we call as Pakistan-occupied Kashmir, which is the Mirpuri ruled areas. They will keep it under tight control. Secondly, this is an area where the substantive majority has been Shia. Ever since the 80s, this has been an area of violence and opposition to the imposition of Wahhabi ideals which Ziaullah brought in. So quietly, Pakistan is now changing the sectarian composition of this Shia majority area. After all, the Shias and Ismailis there, traditionally, and bringing in more and more Sunni settlers, particularly from Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, Pashtuns.
Mr. Sareen, you've been to that area. You've seen the situation on the ground. My question to you is, how tightly is Baltistan in particular governed, in the light of the fact that it is crucial for that area to be stable, for the Chinese investment and the Chinese economic corridor to come through into mainland Pakistan, and also this whole aspect of demographic change that is happening there, to what end and what effect? Because Pakistan often lectures India about India interfering in the demographic patterns in J&K, which is absolutely untrue, because that's one thing India has ensured, that it has kept it the way as best as it can, as it was in 47.
You know, Maruf, there are two parts of POK. One is what is euphemistically called Azad Jammu and Kashmir. Out there, the state subject regulations are still observed fairly consistently. But in the northern areas, or now what is called the Gilgit-Baltistan region, out there, as Ambassador Parthasarathy is suggesting, there has been a massive demographic transition, and that tension is palpable. We traveled to Gilgit in 2004. And I've traveled a lot in Pakistan, but one area in Pakistan where everything was measured from a sectarian angle, whether it was markets, whether it was products, whether it was political ideology and philosophy, everything was being seen in terms of sectarian, from a sectarian standpoint. I've never seen anything like that inside Pakistan. So one is, that is a clear change which was coming in that region, and I'm talking about 10 years back. Since then, it has only increased. So there was a climate of fear even 10 years back. I'm sure it's there now. The important thing is that one realized the growing discontent in that region. And I think one of the reasons why they came up with this half-baked kind of empowerment regulations under which elections have been held was to control that discontent, because there was this brewing movement against Pakistani control. That does not mean that those guys were attracted to India, probably still not, because then the communal angle would often come in. But increasingly, I think this was one of the reasons why to address that growing discontent, they decided to throw a few crumbs at the people of Gilgit-Baltistan, and that is why this electoral process was started.
Mr. Parthasarathy, you earlier referred to about, the issue about China and the role that China wishes to play, is already playing, has a serious foothold in that region. One commentator has even argued that China, by virtue of its physical involvement in Baltistan, has now come plonk in the middle of the Kashmir issue as another major party to the dispute. What's your view about Chinese presence? How do the Baltis look at it? How does Pakistan look at the fact, because Pakistan's going out of its way to compromise for the Chinese, including building a tunnel around a lake in the Karakoram highway, which has now become 14 miles long, simply because they don't want this highway to go into oblivion. You know, they would like the highway to very quickly happen, because that's Pakistan's big hope now.
Well, firstly, let's be clear. Pakistan has illegally ceded 5,100 square kilometers in Shaksgam to China. And that is something I'm afraid we have not been taking up strongly enough. I think every time we take it up with Pakistan, we should say this is illegal. And every time we take it up with China, we should say you are in illegal control of parts of our territory. We somehow run shy of using that sort of very clear language in dealing with the Chinese. Certainly the roads are being built, certainly dams will be built. But remember one thing, and this was told to me by a very knowledgeable and perceptible individual who's a thinker. Nuclear weapons are best stored in the reverse slopes of hills. My concern is that much of this building activity could well be for nuclear weapons silos, given the close nuclear and missile cooperation between China and Pakistan. I think we need to have much better satellite and other intelligence about what is happening. it poses a direct challenge to our security. It's also an issue we should take up, because if weapons could come through, as they have been coming through regularly and during the Kargil conflict, and given the extent of Chinese proliferation of nuclear weapons technology, the Pakistani missiles are variants of the Chinese DF-9 and DF-18. Stationing those missiles on the reverse slopes is a direct security threat.
Right. I mean, a lot of information which has been provided by two experts on the northern areas of Pakistan, including Gilgit-Baltistan and the so-called Azad Kashmir, what India calls POK. But we'll be back after a break to look at another area where there is a huge deal of unrest in Pakistan, and that is Baluchistan.